Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. A shooting yesterday at YouTube's headquarters in California wounded 3 people but left only the shooter dead. The killer was an Iranian refugee named Nassim Aghdam. Apparently, Aghdam believed that YouTube's content policies had somehow sabotaged her efforts to become a digital video star. In rage, she drove to the company's headquarters and opened fire. That's what we know. Now let's pause for a moment and pretend this is not the 8 p.m. show on Fox News. Let's pretend it's somewhere else on the dial, maybe CNN or MSNBC or actually any other cable channel or newspaper in America. If that were true, by definition, we'd have to draw hard and fast conclusions from this tragedy using the limited fact set available. We don't really know much at this stage, but sweeping dumb generalizations are what the media do, so we would do that. And of course, we'd need a very specific script in order to make those generalizations. So what do we conclude from what happened yesterday? Well, first off, the shooter was a woman. She was female. So clearly, America has a problem with toxic femininity. And we need to address that crisis right away, starting with more university panel shaming an entire gender. Somebody alert the HR department to this. And then there's the gun. We'd focus relentlessly on the gun because nothing is more pivotal in a shooting than the weapon that was used. It's always the gun's fault, always. The shooter in this case used a Smith & Wesson 9mm handgun. Those guns need to be banned tomorrow, along with all other assault pistols. And if you disagree with that, you're evil. Next, the shooter was a vegan and a supporter of PETA. Therefore, PETA is now a terrorist organization. Anyone who supports PETA, even those supporters who disapprove of mass shootings, is a monster and has blood on his hands. Let's hope that CNN hosts a town hall meeting where YouTube employees can scream at PETA spokesmen. They deserve to be screamed at. They caused the shooting. But wait. Media outlets aren't reaching any of those conclusions. Why not? Well, because there's no obvious way to use this shooting to advance the objectives of the Democratic Party. So the media will stop talking about it soon. That's how corrupt they are. They're also incredibly stupid, especially on the subject of firearms. The people yelling at you about guns on television aren't sure what end the bullet comes out of. They're kids, they're children, with all the ignorance and moral certainty of 5th graders. We could show you a million examples of that because they're everywhere. But here's the most amusing one we've seen recently. It happened yesterday. This is MSNBC's resident genius, Nicole Wallace, mistaking the opening of a soda can for gunfire. Watch.
Steve Schmidt, I always go back to the horror of 9/11 and the complete reliance. You know, we are in our tribes, we're in our corners most of our lives. I think we just heard some gunshots. Should we listen to that for a second, control room? Is that not gunshots? Okay.
Not gunshots? No, Nicole, not gunshots. Pretty funny. But be certain to listen very carefully as she lectures you about the Second Amendment, because she knows a lot about it. Pete Hegseth is Fox & Friends weekend host. He's a former member of the U.S. military, a decorated one, and he joins us tonight. So, Pete, it's a pretty simple question. We kind of know the script. We know the way these things unfold, how they're analyzed in the press. We draw sweeping conclusions from a pretty limited set of facts. You're not hearing that tonight. You're not hearing the other channels say toxic femininity is a threat to America. Why is that?
Well, of course you're not. Wrong bad guy, Tucker. Wrong bad guy. Female of Iranian descent. She's a fitness buff. She's a vegan. She's a PETA member. Not an NRA member. Not a Trump supporter. Not a member of the NRA. And as a result, doesn't fit the very convenient narrative. And as a result, it's silence, Tucker. I mean, it is NBC, CBS, negligent coverage. ABC, glancing blow. NBC said she's apparently an animal rights activist. They're moving away from this as quickly as they can with almost... imagine if it was an NRA member that did this. Is he apparently an NRA member or is he actually an NRA member? In this case, apparently an animal rights activist. But no judgment or blood on the hands of a PETA member, always blood on the hands of an NRA member, because it would be absurd to me to define an entire population as violent because they believe in animal rights, just like it's absurd to believe an entire population of Second Amendment supporters believes in violence because they support our rights.
So I'm a little confused here. So what you're suggesting, and my producer just said in my ear, he's watching the other channels, none of them are covering this right now, that the coverage of gun crimes really isn't an effort to reduce the number of gun crimes. It's an effort to make a series of partisan points? Is that what you're saying?
It's an effort to impugn the Second Amendment and those who support it, Tucker. I mean, ultimately, it all depends on the labels that apply. You know this, identity politics are one-sided. If you, a white Christian male who voted for Donald Trump and believe in the Second Amendment, who owns an AR-15, then you must have a proclivity to violence. But you are a female of any other shade who owns a handgun and supports animals, and you commit violence. Nothing to see here. Turn the channel. Good Morning America, as they did this morning, will not even cover this shooting, and won't draw a larger narrative as a result. Again, apparently an animal rights activist. This is what the modern media has turned into: cheerleading for a cause, which is taking away our guns, which is exactly what we know they want to do, as opposed to reporting the news and then moving on if it's not relevant.
It doesn't sound like journalism. It does seem to me that it crosses a line when it moves from attacking the president personally. They don't like Trump. I get it. He doesn't like them, by the way.
Sure.
But from that, which you could sort of understand, you probably shouldn't do it, but I get it, to moving over to advocating for specific policies that affect 320 million Americans as if there's only one side of the debate. It moves from childish annoyance to full-on propaganda.
Of course,
doesn't it?
I've heard journalists on other networks say it is our obligation to continue to talk about the Parkland shooting because we owe it to the American people to keep the conversation alive. If we don't talk about it, the conversation doesn't continue and policies don't change in Washington, D.C. If that doesn't sound like activism, I don't know what is. I mean, it's your job to report the news that is relevant, and a mass shooting is, of course, relevant. You cover it, and then you move on as necessary. But they're deciding what to cover and dwell on to try to change
That's
policy.
Right. But what's so striking is, I mean, if you were going to pick a topic that the media would lobby on, maybe camera angles or lighting, they sort of make up. I mean, they're experts in that stuff. But is there any group in America that knows less about firearms? Nicole Wallace mistook a soda opening for gunshots.
I opened my my Diet Mountain Dew, which I happen to like, and no one around here jumped and thought it was an AR-15, let alone a 9mm. I mean, I need Diet Mountain Dew because I'm up at 6 in the morning like you used to be. It keeps us awake, but I've never mistaken, nor anyone I know would mistake that as gunfire. They know nothing, Tucker. How many members of this media are members of the NRA? How many of them have ever fired an AR-15, let alone an M4, which I carried, let alone a 249 squad automatic weapon? They don't know a squad automatic weapon from a BB gun. Yet they're going to tell me what I can or cannot carry. Of course it's political activism to help their Democratic buddies. They're in the tank. It's not convenient. They're not going to cover it.
Who put all the dumb people on TV? I always ask myself that. It's great to see you. You're not one of them. And I appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you. Well, several tech CEOs responded to the YouTube shooting by demanding that regular people be deprived of their right to carry firearms. That would include Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey. He tweeted this, quote, "We can't keep being reactive to this and thinking and praying it won't happen again at our schools, jobs, our community spots. It is beyond time to evolve our policies." He didn't specify which ones, but you know what he was talking about. He cares much more than you do. Dorsey then endorsed demands issued by the March for Our Lives. Those would include, again, not specific, banning high-capacity magazines, confiscating all weapons designated as assault weapons. Now, what's interesting about all this is that in 2015, Twitter, the company he runs, spent more than $68,000 providing, yes, personal security to Jack Dorsey. Were those guards unarmed? Right. No, they weren't. Joel Payne is former director of African American advertising for Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign. He joins us tonight. Great to see you, Joel. I appreciate your coming on. So it's hard to read this as anything else but an effort by the people in charge to bring more power to themselves, which is what people in charge do kind of instinctively. We get the guns, you don't, shut up and obey. Why is that not what's happening right now?
Tucker, I don't really think that's the right way to look at this issue, and I really enjoyed listening to your conversation with your colleague a little bit earlier. I'm interested to hear that you guys think that it's funny that someone on TV in this environment thought that a soda can opening was a gunshot. You thought that was funny.
I think it's idiotic. Just to clarify, I want to say that I think it's
people hear gunshots all the time, and they don't think it's funny.
But that studio didn't have gunshots. It had a soda opening. And my point is that if you're going to advocate for positions, you have a moral obligation to learn something about the topic. And most people who are doing that haven't bothered to learn. And that's the problem. I'm not in any way denigrating the fear people feel in the face of gunfire. I'm making fun of people mistaking a Mountain Dew can for gunfire. But look, the point is, ordinary people are afraid. You're absolutely right. I think we agree on that. So why would the people in charge who are protected by armed security demand that no one else be allowed to protect himself, if you see what I mean?
Well, I have some frustration towards what I heard from the Twitter CEO today, but for a different reason. I don't like this this trend that we have of waiting for gun violence to come to your backyard before you get woke about it. I mean, just because it happened at a tech company yesterday, is you got this letter with all these tech CEOs who decided to sign on. Listen, I was touched recently by gun violence. I had a very close friend that was impacted by what happened at the Veterans Home in California. But guess what? I felt strongly about gun violence and about all of the concerns around that. Before that, it didn't take that issue to pique my interest. By the way, I think it's very interesting, Tucker. A lot of the people who watch this show and a lot of people who watch this network feel the same way I do. If you look at the polling,
well, I feel
on,
the same way you do.
high-capacity
I'm
magazines,
very
on
upset
bump
about,
stocks, et cetera. Yeah, I was just going to say.
No, but hold on.
Let's
Let's be honest. And one of the sort of pieces of political rhetoric that drives me the craziest is the idea that only a select few care about gun violence. I think most normal people, are horrified by shootings. I know I am. So the question is not, do you feel deeply about it? Are you upset? Of course you're upset. The question is, what's the most effective response? What's the wise thing to do? That's where the debate is. It's not over who cares and who doesn't. Everybody cares. I mean, come on now.
So yeah, I would turn that question back to you and say, what should we do? Yeah, I mean, the NRA...
I think, well, I'll give you a perfect example. So with the Parkland shooting, we have a well-documented string of failures by people whose job it was to protect the kids in that school, and they didn't. There were 4 armed cops outside, 4, who heard the gunfire and didn't go in. I never heard their names mentioned at the March for Our Lives. I doubt you know their names. I never hear anybody mention that. We hired people to protect those kids. 17 were murdered because they didn't act, but it's the NRA's fault? That's insane. That's just pure politics. You're not taking it seriously if you reach that conclusion, I would say.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. There were a lot of people who failed those children that day. Some of them were the people who didn't run into those buildings, but a number of them were people who were in the State House in Tallahassee and who were in Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Those people also failed.
No, but
we had the chance to act. You could have acted after Sandy Hook. You could have acted after Aurora. You had so many opportunities to act.
You're defending the people in power, as almost everyone on the left does. The people in power are blameless. They didn't do anything wrong. It's you out there who've committed no crime whatsoever. The guns in my closet, if I had them, would be no threat to anybody. But I have to disarm. But the cops whose job it was to protect the kids, they're cool. We can't blame them. It's some legislator.
I didn't say that. I actually agreed with you. I said they share some blame. I said that the blame didn't end with them, though. It also extended to the people who were in Tallahassee at their State House and in Capitol Hill and at State Houses all across the country who failed to act. Yeah.
So what should they have done? I take you seriously. It's why I wanted to talk to you tonight. So just in the minute and a half we have left, just give me a discrete step, specific step that they could have taken to prevent the Parkland shooting, for example.
Well, let's look at a couple things. Why hasn't the president acted on bump stocks? I thought he was hot to trot on that. I thought that was something that the president thought he could act on.
A bump stock makes your rifle less accurate.
Here's the problem.
See, this is you don't know anything about guns.
Here's the problem, though, Tucker. Your answer here is, well, it wouldn't stop this specific act.
I'm asking an honest question, which is what's... No,
we have a gun violence culture.
Okay, so you're blaming the State House in Tallahassee for our culture?
Actually, I am, because we have a laissez-faire culture to gun violence.
Okay,
and we have a culture that has accepted that gun violence is something we can't do anything about when we know we can.
I feel it is something we can do something about. And when armed guards neglect their duty to protect children, I think we should hold them accountable. You instead shifted the blame from the people who actually had power to people whose other positions you don't like in the State House, Republicans. And I asked then, trying to be rational, what should they have done? And you said Trump should ban bump stocks, which had no role in the Parkland shooting.
I was going to say a little bit more. The president can act on this. By the way, the NRA, they could be partners here, right? The NRA is running scared. The reason why you see them turning John Paul Stevens and a bunch of 17-year-olds into boogeymen is because they know public sentiment is at an all-time low for what they fight for, which is the right for gun manufacturers to make money.
But you're arguing rhetoric and bumper stickers. I want actual solutions because, like you, I care. I wanted to know what the new law is that would have prevented Parkland. There are a lot of shootings, a lot of different causes. I asked for one specific answer to that one, and I got bump stocks and John Paul
I
Stevens.
can give you.
This
I
is
can
the
give you
problem.
more. I can give you more.
Well, how about
we
one?
We can restrict access to people who are mentally ill to
But we
having
already
guns.
have done
we can
that.
stop terrorists from purchasing guns. We could have done that. Congress wouldn't do that. You got Toomey's legislation.
no
You got Manchin's
terrorist-
legislation.
we already have
you got
the
Durbin's
law.
legislation. So many people have tried to act on this, but the intransigence in
But
Washington,
that's
led by
a
the
lie.
NRA, won't
That's a
allow it.
lie. If you go buy a gun, it screens people who are mentally ill. The authorities, the actual authorities, failed to screen this kid despite the fact everyone knew he was mentally ill. They didn't do anything, and they're
Unfortunately,
not
the
being
majority of
blamed.
Americans and the majority of Republicans actually disagree with you, and the polling reflects that.
Well, okay. I don't know what to say. Those are the facts. Joel, thank you. Thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
on. I appreciate it.